The CEO is a very unique animal. It's an animal that hunts, thinks, sleeps, and lives differently from all other species. It has its own language and its own instincts. It eats last and has worries that no one else has. The CEO has thoughts it can't express to its employees, to its friends, and to its spouse. It's an animal unlike any other animal. I'm Alex Gertzberg, and this is CEO Confidential, where we learn about this rare breed, one heartbreak, one victory, one story at a time. This show is sponsored by the law firm of Gertzberg Licata, your ally for business growth. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. My guest today is Adam Kaufman, advisor, convener, listener, multifaceted venture capitalist. Adam is the former president of HealthNet and a podcast host himself. He's in his fourth season of Up2, which shares the name of a foundation that he runs called the Up2 Foundation. Adam, welcome to CEO Confidential.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Thanks for being here. Adam, tell me about that time when you were running HealthNet, Health Network, and the internal Adam Kaufman world didn't exactly match with the world that people saw externally. Tell me that story.
Okay. So that was actually prior to Health Network. If you want to talk about the personal situation, which is totally fine. I was running something called Renewal by Andersen, which was a replacement window company. And I was the son-in-law in a family business. And it was a fast-growing unit of a bigger enterprise, a collection of companies. And this is when I joined EO as a first-time owner in a business. And this is also a time, I was pretty young. I'm 50 now, so maybe I was like 30 then. And everything in my life was going perfectly. I was president of this fast-growth company. I was president of the parish council at my church. I was president of our then called YEO, our EO chapter. So it must have been very vain because I was the president of everything. But externally, while everything looked awesome, internally things weren't going great. And we just had our first child, this lovely young girl, my daughter, Emily Grace. And again, leading all of these things. But a couple of my friends were like, Adam, you look great. You've lost some weight. And after the first few of those, I realized I couldn't hide it any longer, that my personal life was like falling apart in terms of my marriage. So I think that's what you're referring to, that period of my life.
It is. So how does that internal sort of private, personal conflict and those personal problems, how does that affect you running Renewal by Andersen?
It affected me in a very negative way in that I would leave the house every morning. How can I fix my marriage today? And it was just an all-encompassing topic, as one might imagine, filled up my head and my heart every day. But the good news is sometimes I would jump into the work and we were just so busy. My final year, we were ranked number 10 in what's called the Weatherhead 100. It's a list of fast growth companies in all industries. So it was a real fast-paced environment. So that was actually a good thing, ironically, because I could just forget about my personal life for a few hours or an hour at a time or a meeting at a time or a project at a time or putting out one fire at a time. Because sometimes the good work, the hard work is its own reward. And maybe that was a blessing that I wasn't just sitting home all day worrying or biting my fingernails or something worse.
And then conversely, a lot of entrepreneurs kind of view work as sort of an escape from personal problems at home. I know I did. I'm divorced now after 14 years of marriage, and that was definitely the case for me. I viewed my law firm and my businesses as my escape from all the problems at home. Did you view it that way?
Not as an escape. I just knew both were extremely important responsibilities. And while my world was turned upside down, that really wasn't an issue, I don't think.
Yeah.
Like, I can't say if I focused more on the home life, things would have been differently, or I'm not as worried about that. If I'm not sure, but maybe we should interview you in this show, and I should ask you, well, delve into that a little bit, Mr. Alex.
Well, I could talk about that all day, Adam, but I would bore the shit out of you if I did. Um, how about the support network that you had? I know EO is a huge source
It
of
really
support.
was. Yeah.
Yeah. How important was it for you to have that support network, and how did it help you?
Words can't describe the peer network that made me a priority for them. When I eventually shared, when I was no longer hiding this problem from everybody, once I started sharing it, my forum group, and they all had busy lives of their own with young kids and growing companies and other priorities. They all dropped everything to be at my dining room table on a Sunday, like right after they heard of this news. And we had like a board of directors meeting about my life, like so many people do with their forum groups. I was usually the ringleader helping other people. And it was just something I'll never forget. Again, 20 years ago, some of these forum mates are still among my best friends, and I'll be forever grateful.
Yeah. There was a decision that you made you had to decide whether you were going to stay in Cleveland or move to Washington.
Right.
And that decision was necessitated by your marriage falling apart. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Talk about how you, we'll talk about what you decided to do and how you got there and what the consequence of that decision was.
Right. I grew up in Washington, D.C., so I love that area of the country. Very vibrant, stimulating place where you mentioned, a support group. I still had a significant support group back home, so to speak, where I grew up in Northern Virginia. But in a context of shared parenting, after the marriage ended, I, maybe surprisingly to some, decided we would stay in Cleveland because we all of us could have moved back in separate houses, but we stayed in Cleveland because I just thought the ability to share parenting of a child, our daughter, would be easier and more kind of user friendly, family friendly to do it here rather than a busy metropolis like Washington. Why are we talking about this right now? Is because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have met the woman of my dreams 5 years later, 5 years into that process. Now I've been married 15 years to my wife, Claire, and we would have never crossed paths if I moved back to where I grew up in Washington. And my daughter and I have a spectacular relationship. Often people wonder, how we did it. We're asked that sometimes. So many blessings, but sometimes we get these whys in the road moments, and maybe there's no one obvious answer. Should I go left or go right? But I took a certain path, and really glad that I did.
Yeah. I never want to miss an opportunity to learn from someone else's despair. And I know that at that time it must have been, right? It must have been
awful. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so when I think of the leaders that I admire most, they are a regular, constant example of someone who has brought themselves back from a bottom, right? Whether it's a divorce or alcoholism or just something horrible in their life that at the time they thought, I'm never going to recover from this, right?
Right.
And so we talked about your support network and how that helped you.
Yeah, that was part of the support network. That wasn't exclusively, but yeah, I thought EO would be relevant for this conversation. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned that you were pretty active in your church. That had to be a big part of it. Yeah.
Home Bible studies. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So when you look back, and how long ago did you say this was?
This was like 19 years ago to 15 years ago. So it
Okay.
was like a 4-year walk in the valley
Yeah. Yeah.
for
So
me.
we already, so look, you just mentioned that, but for your decision to stay here and but for the divorce, you would not be married to this wonderful woman that
Right,
you're
right,
married to today. But
right.
I'm curious, Adam, from that time of despair and sadness and heartbreak, what else do you learn as a leader today, as 10 to 10 plus years later? I mean, what do you draw from that experience, that still resonates with you today?
Oh, so much, but maybe something good for this conversation would be that we're all going to face curves in the road. We are all going to face curves in the road. Even the Bible tells us that. And it's up to us to know how we're going to navigate them. We too will have troubles, Jesus said. And I was, living the high life in the fast lane, president of all those things and successful business and bought a home with cash and perfect new daughter, and some big curves in the road, came my way. So I would just encourage, and I often, when talking to students or mentor young people, I sometimes talk about how we're all going to have these curves in the road, and are you going to be well equipped to face them, whether it's your faith system, your peer group, or other support networks to help you navigate them.
Um, it reminds me, I mean, I wonder if you draw any, you just mentioned a quote from Jesus. Something that I rely on a lot is this quote from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Hmm.
Um,
Great
man,
book.
yeah, something to the effect of, um, uh, man is the only animal who can choose his attitude in any given set of circumstances, right? I learned from my own divorce, um, and this does help me as a leader, and this is something that I think about in business all the time, right? Business is a stressful thing. It's constant failure. If you're a good leader, then you're taking risks a lot, some more calculated than others, and some more successful than others, but there's always risk. If there wasn't, then it wouldn't be business. It would just be guarantees, and you'd probably be working for somebody else. But for me, that was a lesson that I really relied on during my divorce, during my time in Iraq. The idea that you can choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances. Now, when we have, if a key employee leaves, if I lose a key client, if a deal doesn't go the way I want it to, um, I try to remember that I don't have to follow the sadness that naturally comes up. I don't have to dwell on it. I can choose my attitude.
Hard to do, but it's the right path to take. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Um, that was a really inartful way to ask a question.
That's not inartful. It's good to share. I mean, experience sharing is more important than Q&A, I think. So thank you for sharing that on your program with me.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, other than that quote from Jesus that you just gave, um, are there and were there things that you drew inspiration from, lessons, ideas, concepts that you believe got you through that time, number one, and number two, that you actually apply in business as well?
Yes. I mean, I think about humility every day. My own show, Up2, is a show that features leaders who are as humble as they are successful. That's the whole theme of the show. That's like the byline. And a key component of humility is forgiveness. So I used to listen to tapes. We were still listening to tapes 15 years ago in the car about forgiveness. And I learned that I needed to be able to forgive others if I wanted to also be forgiven. So the humility and forgiveness piece is so important. And in business, I think pride is the toughest sin to manage. At least for me, it is. Pride in what the competitor is doing, or pride in my friend's car that's better than mine, or pride in the larger second home, whatever. Idolatry is a synonym of pride, just idolatry for money. So for me, the humility, forgiveness piece breaks down all of that. The struggles with pride, and the idolatry that comes, that the trappings of success often, kind of draw us in with. I don't mean to get so faith-based, but this is a deep. I mean, you're asking me about a period of my life which was a low point, and without faith, I wouldn't have come out of it.
Do you, for me, humility is something that I need to cultivate. I need to be intentional about, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Other things too, empathy.
Well, you're a parent, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Humility comes pretty easy if you hang out with your kids.
100%. Yeah. Also from golf.
Okay. I don't golf, but I imagine, yeah.
Well, I don't golf well, but I'm humbled every time I attempt it. But you're right, 100%.
Yeah.
I also never miss an opportunity to ask business leaders about their habits, particularly as it relates to, the story, the thing that we're talking about. So we're talking about humility. We're talking about staying positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, Adam, how do you, what habits do you have? And what do you do on a regular routine basis to cultivate and to cue or remind yourself of these qualities?
That's a good question. To try to be more what I want to be is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, like something small is I write handwritten notes and still put them in the mail to people. And a lot of people say, oh, no one's done that for me in years. I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan yesterday, and this morning on my to-do list was like 3 different handwritten letters in the mail. I got to go to the website and find the address because a lot of people don't even have business cards anymore. And I write the personal note in my personal stationery. I love doing it. I don't do it so as to appear more humble, but I think it's I don't know, people like receiving the handwritten notes. Maybe it's a form of humility, whether the person was like a young up and comer or someone much more accomplished than me. I love writing the handwritten notes. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's an example. And then a more kind of substantial example is in my office. Most people have an office and they have a desk, and when we have employees, there's like the seat where the employee sits in front of you with the desk. And I learned from one of my mentors that I put a cross above the head, like back in my sight line beyond. So the employee doesn't even see the cross, but I see it. And it reminds me to be more humble and to not be some jerky superior. Visually, it just reminds me. And an awesome fellow named Joe Canizero, and a Catholic leader in Louisiana, taught me this many years ago. And it's a good trick.
Yeah.
I don't know if trick's the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So right over there, the cue that I have for when people sit over here is simplify and slow down. Right?
Good. And that's to you. Those are words for you.
Yeah. 100. Yeah, exactly. But the slow down part, when you said that lately I've been reminded more and more that things like writing handwritten notes, journaling, meditation are all great ways to slow down automatic thinking and automatic reacting, which I think is huge for business leaders, right?
Yes.
Do you have ways that besides handwritten notes and prayer, presumably, ways that you slow down your thinking?
Would you like me to be authentic?
Please.
Candid?
Yes.
I have a cigar every day.
All right.
It's really relaxing. Yeah, it really does. I'm not driving somewhere. I'm not conducting some meeting. I'm not on a Zoom call. I'm having a cigar, either with one or two other people. I have a particular best friend who we have a cigar together almost every day. But even when not doing that, even by myself, it's a nice time for contemplation and self-reflection.
Yeah.
I know it's not
Yeah.
good for me, but it relaxes me.
Yeah. Good. Good. That does slow things down.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What do
Adam,
you do,
I
Alex?
journal, I meditate.
How long do you meditate? It's
I
hard to do.
I go between 1 and 20 minutes every day, and that
It's
is
a
a
big
wide.
delta. That's
It's and that is also whenever I have tried to set. This is how my mind works. Whenever I have tried to set um, established amounts of time to do anything, um, there is a part of my brain that wants to reject it and rebel it. And I'm sure a psychoanalyst someday will be able to trace that back to some event with my dad as a kid. But
Mhm.
but the best way for me to be consistent with anything is to have zero parameters, right?
Mm,
You know,
mm.
anything more than 1 and less than 20 is a good day.
Okay,
But I do it every day, and
good for you.
I journal every day. I start every single day with readings by reading something inspirational,
Mhm.
um, because I believe that that sets the tone for my day. But all of those things are intended to slow down automatic processes. And
Mhm.
then lately, Adam, I have been trying to create a habit loop in my mind. My understanding of habits is it's always cue, routine, reward, right? There's a cue that triggers
Starts it.
something.
Mhm.
Yep. Then you insert your routine and then you reward yourself somehow, right? And you do that
Okay.
enough times and you've created a habit. So what I've been trying to do
We do
is
that with like dogs and training dogs. So we give them a treat at the end,
it's totally
not
Pavlovian.
to assimilate you to a dog, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
We're all animals. You feel free, feel free. Sometimes I think a dog is way smarter than me. But I have been trying to use that cue, routine, reward, habit loop to um, create the habit of taking mindful breaths every time I switch tasks, right? So when I go from like email to a meeting, or from, just finished lunch, I'm sitting back at my desk, I take like a mindful breath
Good.
or
Yeah.
two,
Mhm.
you
You don't
know?
jump into the next thing right away. I get it.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And then at
Mhm.
the end of that, I have, it's going to sound really stupid, but after I do that, I quietly, subconsciously give myself a little pat on the back. I'm like,
Good.
and I give
Yeah.
myself a little attaboy, you know?
Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live. You're just affirming yourself.
Yes. You're
I
good
can
enough.
do this. I'm good
Yes.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the idea, the thought is, if you, I mean, this goes back to that, how to slow things down to
Mhm.
be more
Mhm.
intentional and calmer. And
Right.
I believe that if I can do throughout the day mindful breathing up to a minute, or a minute or more, I should say, um, 5, 10, 20 times a day, then that is a recipe for serenity, intentionality, mindfulness.
Awesome. Good for you.
You have done a great job flipping the script, Adam, and turning this into an
That's my
interview
goal.
about me.
That's why listener is the first component of my LinkedIn profile.
Well, and that's why you're a great podcast host. I almost said
Thank you.
pothead.
Thank you.
Podcast host yourself.
Thank you.
That is up2foundation.org/podcast is where people can find the up
Yeah.
to.
Or just up to, just literally up in the number 2 on everything.
Yeah,
Google, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, up to.
up to.
Like the sign right here.
Yes.
Up to.
As in, what are you up to?
Exactly.
Right. Um, and company website is up2foundation.org.
Thanks.
The 2 is the number 2. The rest is all letters and words. And you've got a blog up there, up2foundation.org. /blog, which has some interesting stuff on it. Adam, thank you for doing this. and
Thanks for having
joining
me.
Absolutely. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good luck with your show.
Thanks, Adam. Folks, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you next time. Thanks for listening to CEO Confidential. I hope you enjoyed it. Visit us at ceoconfidential.net and visit our sponsors, the business law firm of Gertzberg Licata and Cover My Six, a business solution that flushes out and repairs legal minefields before they blow up in court. We'll see you next time right here for another episode of CEO Confidential.